yet another view because there's never enough screens, right?
I wonder if I should put my glasses on. I'll probably just reflect the light. So
Yeah, I actually specifically did contacts today just because I wasn't sure with the reflections. So we've got our little preview over here.
which is what I will eventually see.
Yep.
Over here. Can I make that bigger?
Yeah, well, you'll see that once we actually start.
I know. I just
Pushing
want to
it
make
out.
it bigger.
Yeah, I know.
I could make this bigger.
All right, Kelly, Carolyn, everything's looking good on this end.
Beautiful.
Any questions?
No. Yeah, we'll
Cool.
figure it out as we go. If we can survive 2 rounds of distance learning, we can survive the next hour.
That's right. It's just an hour. It's nothing compared to the last number of months.
Hey, look, my 6-year-old kept leaving her own grade primary class to photobomb my science 9 and math 10, so it's all good.
Yeah, we had similar experience at our house too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same. But usually mine were coming in to ask for snacks.
Yeah, eventually it was just a drawer. You're allowed to go into the drawer, take whatever you need. Don't bother mom or dad when we teach.
That's right. And you can watch as much Netflix as you want when I'm working.
Yes.
Exactly. Disney Plus. It's all about the Disney
Yeah.
Plus.
You're right on. Right on.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the help and support.
Yep, no problem. I'll come back in just about 10 seconds before I'm going to enable you, okay?
Sounds
Maybe in
good. Thank
5
you.
minutes. Yeah, right on.
All right. Anything we need to do in our last 5 minutes?
Probably
Really don't
not.
think so, but
Probably not. Knowing me, I'll need to pee again halfway through. I don't have to pee right now.
we'll just develop some sort of hand signal. You take this one. I'm going to just talk for a while. Yeah, on my fun stuff in my classroom. So FYI, one of these was $3.50 and one of them was $4. I don't know which was which because I just grabbed them at the same time. But those have to go up in my room now.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Etsy, I have some of my Etsy purchases here.
Oh, right on. Oh, you must be a RuPaul fan, aren't you?
Yeah, I just saw that.
Because a friend of mine has that on her costume. The wedding I went to.
This is an Etsy artist out of Montreal. She made my Mental Health Matters sticker that's all shiny and holographic over there. I actually have a bunch more coming and one of them will be yours. But she does STEMist stickers.
Oh
And
my god.
then over to Marsha P. Johnson too.
That's amazing. That's very cool.
Yeah.
I love the finish on those.
I know.
They always look so good.
She didn't have any more Katherine Johnson in stock, and I'm like, well, when you do, let me know, because I need that one.
That's awesome. I just
I'm now all
ordering
about
off
putting
Etsy.
stickers all over my room.
I've never done Etsy. I always do Amazon.
Well, I like Etsy for the being able to support small local artists.
Yeah.
This is my
Oh,
other
I've
love.
seen that one. I love that one.
Yeah.
I love that one.
Very so. While we have a moment, I'm actually gonna stick it over here and start flattening.
We only have 3 minutes. I know, right? I'm just at that stage. Can we start it so we can be done?
Mm-hmm.
I said I wasn't going to drink today. I wasn't
Don't turn on the
driving,
closed
drinking.
captions yet. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, don't do that. I still haven't decided which one of your shirts is my favorite.
I have more. There's always more coming. Like, I'm literally to the point now of I need to take scissors and hack out the parts that I want to put on the wall.
That's the smart thing. Is order them like a kid size, and then you don't need to actually wear them. That's my. I love this one.
Also, randomly, when threatened,
We keep this in here.
yeah,
That's awesome.
I apparently they have another skin tone one that's not the usual beige. So I have to find that or maybe order it off Amazon.
I want the crayons,
We have the markers too.
just for Gabby's collection.
Oh, 3 people who are actually here, maybe 4 for the presentation.
See Mandy's bag. She's gonna took my job. I'm okay if there's not a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm not gonna have to jump.
Because it gets recorded. So
Well, that's just it.
and really, it's a beautiful day out.
It's a
too.
beautiful day out. It's the middle of the summer.
And some people
And I feel
have
like the
done-
recording of this is going to get used a lot more than the live one.
Yeah.
I think this is also slightly the downfall of the virtual presentation. Like if you sign up and go to Halifax or go to Antigonish, then you're there for stuff.
Mandy again. I feel like she's trying to watch too.
All right, ladies, I'm back. I'm going to enable your stream now. So it's going to be live in 10, 9. Good luck.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, ladies, I'm back. I'm going to
Oh,
enable your
there's a
stream now.
delay.
So
I should mute
it's
this.
going to be live in.
All right, so we can see that it's 2:30. We've got ourselves time to come in just a little bit under the hour, so we're going to give it another minute or two just for some other folks to join us. It being a beautiful day and, you know, not wanting to lose anyone, but we do also want to value your time as well, so I promise we'll get started in just a moment. Perfect. I'm terrible at waiting.
Yeah, me too.
It's the same thing. If we were live with people, I'd be able to take a breath and make conversation. Hey, Kelly, how are you doing this afternoon?
Wait time is always the hardest.
It is. It's true. At least you and I can present from the same spot.
That's true.
All right. Well, now that people got to hear a little bit of banter, hello and good afternoon. I'm Carolyn Nicolo. I am a school-based instructional leader here at CEC. We're actually presenting from my classroom this afternoon. I have presented regularly at the Math Teachers Association October conference, as well as doing Summer Learning Academy the past 2 summers. Been involved with table leader for Math 10 marking sessions, and prior to that, Math 12. I work for Homework Hub in a couple of different capacities. And professionally, my interest focused a lot on differentiation, meaningful resilience, and productive struggle. I'm going to kick it over to my colleague.
So my name's Kelly Power. I'm currently a regional math coach with CCRCE, mostly grades 7 to 12. Before that, I was a department head and math teacher at Amherst Regional High School for 16 years. I am was a member of the Math 10 Advisory Council that oversees a lot of stuff with the Math 10 exam. I've also been a table leader for the Math 10 marking sessions for many years, and I also work with the Nova Scotia Homework Hub in several capacities. So my professional interests focus a lot on developing student thinking and their problem-solving skills in the classroom. So that's us. And before we get started, we would like to have a land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that today we live, enjoy, thrive, or struggle, work, and play in the land of Mi'kmaq. Mi'kmaq is firstly the home of the Mi'kmaq people, and out of their grace, also the home to generations of settlers from a wide variety of cultures. Mi'kmaq is and always has been unceded. In the spirit of the peace and friendship treaties, first signed in 1726, all who reside on this land need to live in peace with each other, showing mutual respect and friendship.
Thank you, Kelly.
So just a really quick agenda for today. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because you're going to see it as we go. We're going to do a short history of our approach to these math stations. What are they? We're going to do a couple of check-ins along the way in the form of a Menti poll. We're going to demo and show you some examples. We're going to look at why we use stations. We're going to discuss how to design them, what our next steps are, and we're going to do a Q&A and give you some stuff to take away.
Everybody likes leaving workshops with a few things they can take away. So sort of starting out, I really believe in a storytelling perspective, and I think it helps to kind of acknowledge where this came from. So the beginning of the story of our math stations is one that many, many teachers can relate to. This is me the morning of my very first day with students at my very first teaching job back at Hants East in 2005. And my job started out a lot like many of us, prepping for different new courses. I had IPPs to write. I was getting students ready for provincial exams. I took a deep breath and I managed to get through it. And as time went by, I found that I had a few other challenges, new courses again, storm days. Gosh, we all love entering data in gradebook. And time went by and a few more challenges came up in my life. And then along came my daughter. And so I started to try and find some more balance because I couldn't always give all of my time and energy to my students the same way that maybe I would have in the past, because this adorable little nugget wanted some of that time and energy too. As a parent and as a teacher, I knew how valuable play is, even for high school students in the same kind of situations that we'll be talking about today, and also how valuable choice is for our children and for our students. But I really needed help building that into my teaching practice. I needed a lifeline right over here. And so Kelly and I started to collaborate together. So as a brief history of our stations approach, I started the year that I came back to CEC after my maternity leave. I started with a 5-station activity for my students in my classroom, mostly worksheets, some mazes, some practice multiple choice. And that particular day was really high energy, and our social studies department head was wandering by, and she stopped into my room and went, "Wow, this is awesome. This is not like a math class that I was expecting." And that was a little bit of positive feedback that I needed to get really excited about this and talk about it. But I needed a lifeline. So I reached out to one of my colleagues who I knew who was doing some similar type things. And we started to have conversations. So here at CEC, I expanded to a multi-classroom space in about 2016. I added in a greater variety of activities. And I invited all the Math 10s in the building, since we're usually 2 or sometimes even 3 sections of Math 10 running at the same time. After that, as time went by, I was able to edit the existing activities and add more to choose from so that we could tailor it to our groups. And also in this building, we're lucky enough to also run the pre-IB program. So we have even more students to invite. So we almost have like a little mini math fair.
So at ARHS, I had been doing some similar activities, but when Carolyn and I were speaking, we sort of formalized it a bit more. So I started off running about 6 stations within my own classroom because ARHS is a bit smaller. There's only usually like 4 sections of Math 10 in any given year, so you might have someone at the same time or you might not. Though we did very quickly expand it so that other math teachers in the building, Math 10 teachers specifically, could come and borrow the stations and use them in their own class, or we leave them set up in my class and we kind of trade spaces. And I started off doing more kind of unit specific activities and then kind of learning to generalize them and make ones that were a little bit more easy to use in multiple capacities. And as we went through, I ended up creating a bank of many stations to be used in multiple classes together. So if we were able to have a situation where both next door classrooms were working, it were both Math 10 at the same time, we could open the wall and then we could kind of interchange students to allow for more conversation and just a little bit of a different mix. Or I would have multiple copies of the same station that teachers could borrow and use at their own time.
So now that we've gotten really high energy, because this is something that we're really passionate about, we've seen a lot of success with this with our own students between the 2 schools. What the heck are these stations all about?
So in a lot of ways, it's similar to either a choice board, like you can see here, or like centers, which is very familiar to if you're an elementary student or teacher rather, where students are able to go to different places around the classroom and complete or embrace different activities. There's a lot of other features built in, and we're going to talk about those as we go. Go ahead.
All right, so when we talk about stations, what we're talking about is aiming to have things that are new or different for the students, often going over the same ground that we've already done, practicing skills that they've seen, but in a new way or a different context. Pardon me. And often we design them to be shorter activities so that students can try many of them within a classroom period.
And one of the key things is that the activities are meant to be student-centered. So the student should be able to come to the station, understand what needs to be done, have everything kind of at their fingertips, and be able to be fairly self-sufficient and independent, both with completing the activity and determining whether or not they were correct. And there is also that conversation built in, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah. One of the other big pieces is to allow for movement. Not every high school classroom, but many of us students come in and they take a seat and they stay there for the full classroom period. And especially for a lot of us through COVID, most recently with extended classroom periods, we know how important it is to have body breaks and be able to get up and move. So the station's activity allows students to move within the space. And in fact, we want students to move. And that helps create a different mindset for the students, as well as having choice of what it is they want to do.
So to make the activities more effective, we try to target them at specific outcomes or specific skills. They shouldn't really be coming to a station and spending an hour doing 16 different outcomes. When they come to the station, you're looking to highlight one or two particular things, whether it's a skill, an outcome, or an understanding, so that they're very targeted and students are very, like, they get there and they know what they're doing and what they're supposed to be, understanding and learning.
Another feature is that most of our stations are chosen to foster conversation. Now, we do understand within any classroom makeup, there are always going to be a few students who just want to do their own thing and don't want to talk. But we also know that conversation and discussion is valuable for us from an assessment perspective, as well as thinking about our brain-based learning and how describing something and talking about it out loud so often helps students make those connections that they wouldn't otherwise have, which means very often we choose activities to seed in those conversations and to let us have a lot more one-on-one conversations or small group conversations with our students.
Right. And along with that, we also try to plan the activities so that there is differentiation built into them. So differentiation both of activities and of the amount of the math done within the station, so that we have some repetition activities, we have some problem solving activities, we have some new activities, we have some unit specific activities, but also at each station there would be different entry points for different students as necessary.
Yeah. Another feature is that as much as possible, we're trying to have feedback built in. The station's activity is what I often describe as beautifully chaotic. There is never going to be enough math teacher experts in the room to go help all the students who are themselves experts as well. But many of our students don't have that confidence yet. So one of the things that we do is look at building in feedback so that as soon as a student thinks they're done, they can check their work, or even along the way. They say that they're cheating. We know that it's just good practice, but they can check to make sure that they're on the right track. So with that said, and I do know that we are on our short delay from what our participants are seeing, but it's time to do a little check-in. We've all had so much of this virtual learning. It's really nice to get some interaction on the go. So now and a little bit later on in the workshop, we're going to be participating in an online poll. If you have a mobile device nearby, you can participate by scanning a QR code that we'll put on screen. Otherwise, you can participate by going to a website in a different tab so that we don't lose you. We want to make sure that we're using a different tab or a different window so we don't drop out of this meet. But that website is going to appear on screen in just a moment. I'm using a tool this afternoon called Mentimeter. And we're going to put that up right now for you folks who are going to www.menti.com and using the code 29592799. And for participants who'd like to use the QR code, I'm going to pop back there in just one quick moment. For those of us who are using another tab or another window, www.menti.com. And our code is 2959-2799. If you happen to be looking for that QR code, we'll pop that on screen again. And there are actually 2 questions to answer here. Question number 1, based on what you've heard so far, what interests you the most about this kind of classroom activity? And then we're also going to ask about any questions that you have so far. We'll try and answer them throughout the course of our presentation this afternoon, but often it helps to see those. And those are not being hidden. I love word clouds.
They always look nice.
So right away, we can see some of our favorites as well.
I know that independence is a real big one for a lot of teachers. It's really nice to have them kind of working without you having to run. There will be some of that, you running around the room, especially with the first few times they do it, trying to get everybody on track. Mm-hmm. But after they get used to it, they really do get good at working independently or with a classmate.
And for me, one of the things that really echoes is the idea of variety and of choice, because that was one of the things that I always really enjoyed in my more humanities-oriented courses. Choose the novel, choose how you're going to present about it, choose what you're going to do in drama class. And I didn't always get that in my mathematics or science courses. So I really enjoy those. Those really echo for me. And I think that's something that my Math 10 students have really enjoyed with this activity as well.
I would agree with that. Absolutely.
All right. We'll give that another moment or two. I know the last time I ran a Menti poll for a virtual workshop, I moved on too quickly. And when I hopped back, I discovered lots more of great answers. And I'm always nervous. I don't want to leave anyone's voice out. Just for interest's sake. There is also a second question that we can move on to. If there are any questions about this type of activity, we're really hoping that we've kind of anticipated them and planned the discussion this afternoon to answer them. But just in case, to make sure that we can help out any of our participants this afternoon.
And if not, we don't have questions yet, we'll have time at the end for questions.
For sure.
Too.
Already built in. So while we give that a moment.
Yes, you get that one and I'll get the other one.
All right, so we will have some time for a few more questions at the end of our session, again, to try and honor people's times. I know when we've presented about these stations activities, and they've alternately been called exam review stations and skills stations. There's a lot of different ways that we can use these, but what our participants have often wanted is to see what we're doing. So one of the types of stations that we can have that's not so much a classic, here are some problems and do them, is something called Tarja puzzles. Now, this can be made using a free software that you can grab online. We have a link for that built in. But the idea is that we're looking for two equivalent expressions so that we can match them up. So for example, built into the slides, and then I have some together with me, we can create different polygons. An equilateral triangle is really classic, but my students really like the gem shape for some reason. And in this case, those two were for matching up entire radicals and mixed radicals in simplest form. And students really enjoy those. So literally just taking our Tarja puzzle pieces and saying, I think these two are equal. And then if they've done it correctly, they'll get that polygon at the end. So that's a really nice thing that we can do. And maybe it started out as an original worksheet where students would convert these entire radicals to mixed radicals, convert these mixed radicals to entire radicals, but it feels a lot more fun for a lot of students.
And the other thing too with that is instead of printing off 2 sheets for every student and having them all cutting and taping and doing whatever and making a general mess of your classroom, you can have 1 or 2 copies, laminate them if you so choose. I have a laminator and I love to use it. I'm not shy about that at all. And then you have it ready forever and you don't have to have 8,000 pieces of paper and all these scissors and all kinds of a mess.
Yeah, it turns out after the initial work, the stations approach actually saves a lot of mess. It saves a lot of waste, and it does ultimately save a lot of time.
And I get to use my laminator.
Who doesn't love a laminator?
So another example of a station that we're going to talk about is this is one I use for solving systems of linear equations. There's lots of different possible uses for something similar to this, but in this station itself, I have just a cup full of little colored popsicle sticks, and I've taken all of the popsicle sticks and I have written linear equations on them. And what students do is they take out 2, and their job is to solve that system of linear equations. Now this one, I got 2 really simple ones, and it would be very quick to solve. And then there's sometimes some of them have fractions, some of them have integers, some of them are very simple, like x equals 2. And I usually provide my students with a sheet, and it's in a page protector or laminated so that they could do their work using a whiteboard marker instead of paper. Now, some of them like to use paper and then they get to keep it, and they can do that if they want to. But then I give them the choice of graphing, substitution, or elimination. And then I also sometimes provide them, these are just little flow charts I just leave at the table if it's something that they like to use. So I might leave various things around the table for them. And each station, we'll get to this in a bit, also has like an instruction sheet that just clearly outlines what the expectations are. So that's one that's very unit specific, but you could still use that same concept for a number of different stations.
So in the summer, it's sort of challenging to really show off what these look like. And we fortunately have a YouTube video. I don't love listening to my own voice, so I'm going to let Kelly take this part.
Yeah, so this is what, 2 years ago? Well, it would have been before COVID, where Carolyn was using the stations at CEC, and they were able to book a room and have a number of students in the space, which looks really odd to me now.
It does.
To have everybody mingling without masks and everything. But they came in and they kind of interviewed and had a look and showed the station. So we're going to click on the link and show the video, and hopefully you'll be able to see it. Will they see this tab now?
We're sharing the entire window.
Yeah,
so I
need
think so,
that.
yeah.
I'm a mathematics and physics teacher at CEC, and today we're here in one of our main large rooms in the building doing a multi-class review activity for our grade 10 students who are getting ready to write their provincial exam, which covers 10 months worth of material. So part of it is that the students are getting to interact with different students than they see every day in math class. Another piece of this activity is a little bit different. It's a lot more open-ended than the traditional math class. This is not me standing at the board saying, do these 10 review problems. It's 11 different stations. The students can choose where they want to work. Do they want to do multiple choice practice? Do they want to do a puzzle? Do they want to do word problems? Do they want to practice with flashcards? So It's very differentiated and it's very self-selected. They get to decide what works for them for their review. We've been doing this at CEC for 4 years. I started just after I came back to work from maternity leave, and I was thinking about my daughter, and when she's a Math 10 student, what would I want? And I noticed, even with her being small and a year and a half old, how important choice is and the social aspect, and starting to think more about what's going to be fun for the grade 10s versus just doing 8 review assignments. How can they make this a little bit more interesting and social? We do get really great engagement from the students. This time of year, very often there's a lot of burnout. So not surprisingly, math class isn't always kids' favorite place to be, but especially on the second day when they know that they're going to come back and see someone from another room and have some choice and get to play around. It really gets up the interesting exam review, and it makes it a little bit more fun and interesting for everybody. And traditionally at CEC, we have really good exam results, so maybe this is contributing to that. My dream would be to take this even bigger. There is another teacher, and I have to acknowledge, Kelly Power of Amherst has collaborated with me a lot on this, and she runs a similar activity for the grade 10s at Amherst Regional High School. But I'd love to see us rent out a big space and bring all the grade 10s together for like a half day or a full day from multiple schools and get more teachers involved and kind of like make it like a science fair but a math fair. So that's my end game, but it's also a lot of planning and a lot more work. So small moves, a little bit.
Pause. All right, so now, because you're part of the presentation, you're becoming part of the dream that ultimately we're going to see this roll out and happen in a lot more schools. So welcome to the team. Hopefully we've already started to convince you, but just in case, or if you need some research to be able to help convince your administrators to be on board to help you with this, supplies, investment of time, space, or whatnot, we've got your back. So we have a bunch of different great reasons to use this approach that we can tie into things that we know are best practice, aside from just the sheer joy of students getting to do something a little bit different. Our theme this year for Summer Learning Academy is all about inclusive education. So we wanted to start there. This type of activity is really beautiful because it creates time and space for us as classroom teachers to have assessment that's not product oriented. So often in math class, we're focused on the quiz, the test, the exam, but we know that with assessment, we're looking for triangulation. We're looking for those conversations and observations as well. And because the stations are so beautifully chaotic, and you saw in the video, students are moving around and like they'll actually start to race each other to get to the next empty seat. It's noisy. They kind of lose a little bit of self-consciousness because nobody can hear when they're asking questions or what they're saying. So we can get some really good, authentic assessment that way. As Kelly mentioned earlier, this style of activity is really student-centered, and we have multiple entry points, which is part of what we're looking for in our Tier 1 supports. We design these to be aimed at positive results for all students and let all students find genuine success. So they don't need someone sitting next to them saying, do this, now do this, now do this. There's going to be an activity out there that every student can find success at. It's an approach that's really adaptable. It can be tailored to school culture and classroom needs. So myself, I could have several Math 10 students in our Center 2 space. Kelly at Amherst, sometimes they could open a wall, but sometimes it was a cart that traveled between classrooms for different periods. And as we can tell, this is an activity that encourages a lot of professional collaboration, which is another thing that we see discussed in our Tier 1 approaches.
So there's a few other sort of research-based things that this really hits. And one of them that it really spoke to me was The Six Trumps by Sharon Bowman. If you don't know that, it's an article you can find online. I think it's linked here for you. And there's 6 trumps, obviously, and there's 4 that this really touches on, which is movement trumps sitting. We already know that students need to get up and move around. And if you have 60-minute classes, 75-minute classes, or if you had those double periods this year, you got to get up and get moving. Talking trumps listening. So the more talking your students are doing about the math, the more they're putting it into words, the more they're synthesizing, the more they're understanding. Shorter trumps longer. So shorter activities, stops and starts, right? Those stops and starts, every time they stop an activity or start a new one, that's when they're paying the most attention. That's when their brain is the most engaged. And that's when they're, really going to remember things. And different trumps, same. So the first time they play, a game in the class, the first tarja they do, or the first matching activity is going to be memorable for them because they've never done that in a math class before. You can probably pull in the other two, images trump words, writing trumps reading, but the 4 that we've highlighted here are really the ones that are very easily built in and easily seen with this. And then also, if anybody has seen the Artisan Teacher by Mike Rutherford, if you've done the coaching course with the ILA, for example, there's some approaches in here or some talents, teacher talents that can really be used or seen. Those are called practice, congruency, locale memory, first time learning, enriched environments, success, and delight. So if you've able to see the field guide on the link, it kind of gives you an idea as to what those are and how they impact student learning. And those are just a few, there's many others, but that's another really good example of some of those talents. And then, I can't use your mouse today, apparently. Principles to actions, ensuring mathematical success for all by the NCTM. So that's where a lot of our direction for math is coming from. And there are 8 major principles, but there's 5 that this really kind of nails down for you. And that's tasks promoting reasoning and problem solving, using and connecting mathematical representations, especially when you have stations that are matching different mathematical representations or having them look at one and create another. Facilitate meaningful mathematical discourse. Again, we're back to those conversations between students and the critical thinking and talking it out. Productive struggle fits right in there too, because again, the idea is that they're being as independent as possible. And then building procedural fluency from conceptual understanding. Sometimes they're doing practice, and that's where that procedural fluency comes from. But again, we want to do it from a place of concept, a concept-based approach. So those are a few of the research components.
And we did also want to mention, because it is something that we've become so much more aware of now as educators in Nova Scotia, that we can also start to bring in a lot of what we know is good teaching from a culturally responsive perspective. Again, we've used this phrase student-centered a lot, but when we think about being culturally responsive, it's more than just the teacher stands at the front, Johnny puts up his hand, the teacher calls on Johnny, and we move on. One of the beautiful things about our stations is how collaborative they are. And that means that because of the beautiful chaos and the noise and the movement around, this becomes a much more inviting and inclusive math classroom than a traditional sit at your table or sit in your rows and do a worksheet or do some problems out of the textbook. This approach allows us to communicate high expectations, but maybe in a slightly different way that students are used to. And we're giving the students those expectations in a way that they can understand and respond to. If their job is to create the tarja, we're still getting at all those same outcomes, but now maybe because we're bringing in a different part of the brain, it's in a way that they can relate to, and maybe we're removing any linguistic barriers there. Another really nice piece is that we're moving toward teachers as facilitators in this activity, and students become experts. It's one of my favorite parts of pulling in 2 and 3 different classrooms into the same space, if we're able to do that. Because now different groups of students work together and they get to talk to each other. And now that really shy student starts to get to find their voice and bring their expertise to the table and be recognized for that. And we do also have the ability here. It may just be at the surface level. It may be something as simple as the names that we choose. Maybe it's creating a tarja that's representative of a Mi'kmaq medicine wheel. But the more comfortable we become as educators, we can start to fold in some deeper culture within the activities as well. There's some beautiful geometric sequences and braiding in African cultures that we can start to tie in there. And this becomes a way to fold those in more organically. So that's another great reason that we can start to talk about this activity. So with that said, I know it didn't go so fabulously last time, but we're going to try this again. We're going to go back to our Mentimeter check-in and just sort of ask, now that you've seen a few examples, you saw the videos, you've heard what we've done in our own classrooms, when can you see yourself using this kind of activity? So this time I'm going to pause here on this slide for a few moments so that you can grab a device and go check out that QR code. In fact, I'm going to add my own responses as well. And now for those of us who are using our own window or separate tab, again, our website is www.menti.com, menti.com. And our code is 5493-9539. It's visible at the very, very top of my screen here, and asking when you can see yourself using this kind of activity. Oh, look, we have a wild response. That wasn't us.
Just don't mash a few buttons there.
So now, for us as classroom teachers, I think both of us originally began this as sort of just before a summative review, whether before it's a final exam, before it was a
Cumulative
test at the end of one of our big strands. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense because it does take some time and some effort to put these materials together. And it's far easier to start with a little bit from a broader spectrum of outcomes and create that. And then as time has gone by and we've been able to add to our libraries, I found myself actually this year, because I'm in Truro, many of our students were very personally affected by the events of Porta Peak last year. When we came up on the anniversary, we were in class that day and I had my class for 2.5 hours because of COVID protocols and we needed something different to do. I found myself going to the cupboard where I keep my Math Stations materials and pulling them out. And we use this on a day and at a time where we just needed something different to do. It meant that we were still productive in terms of our practice. It meant that students were still able to do math, but the choice and the difference and the fact that for some students, some of the activities felt a little bit more calm and meditative. I made sure to choose ones that were right for the mood that day. They enjoyed doing some color coding. They enjoyed doing some tarjas. And that was really what we needed that day. And then my colleagues ended up borrowing the materials to do the same things.
Right, and we've done them, or I've done them personally when my students were encountering a couple of topics that they were struggling with, or sometimes they'd be like, can't we just do worksheets all day, as they wanted to do practice. And I'm not big on sitting and doing worksheets all day. I don't do a lot of worksheets, but I thought, you know what, I have enough stations on this particular topic. I think it was factoring at the time, where they can see it in a couple of different ways and they can try it in a couple of different ways. They can work on the type of factoring or the type of question they were struggling with. And so we had a day just kind of in the middle of that unit where we spent the whole class just looking at different ways of applying, factoring and expanding binomials and those sorts of things. So it did start out as almost completely review for me also. But then again, once you build all your resources and you have 4 or 5 different ones on various topics, you can actually pull them out more often. And it doesn't matter if you use it more than once, because just because they could do it in January doesn't mean when you get to May, they don't need more practice again. So,
or perhaps they never did that station in January.
Yeah, or didn't finish it, for example.
So now something else that we've seen, because it's known in my math department that I have all of these stations, some of my Math 11 colleagues have actually asked, saying, oh, wow, we've noticed that our students really need some more help with linear equations when we start out the semester. Can we load up a cart with some of your different stations that focus on linear equations so that we can use this as a front-loading activity to activate prior knowledge? So while the two of us historically have been very focused on Math 10, that doesn't mean that this approach couldn't also work in grade 9, grade 11. It could work all over. We just happened to have focused on the year-long course because that was the one that we had in common. So now, speaking of some more examples, one of the things that we've discovered is, gosh, we live in a much more digital world than I thought we did. So another example, and this is something that we're going to be sharing at the end of the session, is something called pixel art. And one of my colleagues actually introduced me to this that she was using in a different course. And I thought, gosh, what a great idea. So this is a technology-based activity. And a pixelated image begins to appear as students enter correct answers. So we're going to share a copy of a Google Sheet to you folks. This one happens to be based on naming sides for trigonometry. So I'll look at the diagram, opposite to angle theta. That side is 7.7 units long. And if I'm correct, once I hit enter, some pixels start to appear. So in the diagram beside it, that opposite side happens to be labeled as X. Oh, I got that correct. Some more pixels appear. But maybe, as we know so often happens with our students, opposite and adjacent, it's really easy to mix those up. If a student thinks that their adjacent side is X and hits enter there, oh, no pixels appear. Gosh, I guess I didn't get that one right. I should go back and try again. So this is another really nice one that builds off that same idea of play and difference and immediate feedback. And we are sharing a copy of this with you folks at the end of our session. Come here, Mousy.
So we have some examples of stations that you could include, and we do have actually a slideshow of some of these, but I'm going to show you a couple as we go. So one of the stations that's easy to do kind of at any point in the year, at whenever you're using it, is you can practice skills, and they are sometimes worksheets or whatever, but some students would really just love to sit down and do some practice. So you can have a skills station where you're just doing actual practice. The other thing we can do is flashcards. So the flashcards could be numbers or it could be definitions. This one says, what is the radicand of a radical? And then when they flip it over, there's a diagram to explain what it is. And these are all nicely done on scrapbook paper and laminated. We have multiple choice practice. So if students are struggling with multiple choice questions, you can have a section of those. We can have exemplars or find the error. So if you do it out in advance, what is the error? Then we have foldables. So we have quite a number of foldables, and you'll see some pictures, and you're going to get a couple of these, I think.
I think a couple are in the folder.
And so this is an example of a factoring one. So students could either, usually they get the printed part, and you would have them fill in, or they would fill in the examples, or they might have one that they can look at and create their own, but these are just little reference, basically reference cards for them to use. We have Tarja puzzles, which we've already shown you. Some of these are mazes. Some of them you can make, some of them you can find online. This is a trig one where as they go, they're trying to get from start to finish. For this one, I laminated it so they can use whiteboard markers right on it. And then when they flip it over, the answers are on the back. Carolyn was saying she sometimes uses 2-color counters so they can find their track that way. What else have we got? Desmos activities. So we haven't done traditionally a lot of tech-based stations, but now that students seem to be using it so much more and they got into using probably Desmos or various other things, there would be very easy to have a station with a couple of Chromebooks where you give them the option of a couple of Desmos activities to do. There's some where you have matching diagrams and descriptions. So this is an example of a matching activity where there's a selection of graphs, general form linear equations, slope point form linear equations and slope intercept form linear equations, and you can tell them apart by the color, and they get them mixed up and they have to find an equivalent set. Then there's some unit specific activities
I
that,
don't think we grabbed
yeah, I
any.
don't think we grabbed any, but the one like the solving systems of equations would be unit specific. And then they can also, you can kind of give them an online scavenger hunt where they're accessing resources. They can look at videos, they can look at practice problems on Homework Hub. That can be another sort of station. So there's all kinds of different, different
really,
ones.
you know, it's up to you and your imagination. So when you get your copy of this slide deck in the folder that we're sharing at the end, you'll notice that this particular title is hyperlinked to take you to another slide deck that we prepared that was just some quick examples. So we have some examples of different signages that we've used. Kelly has used the Tarja software that we talked about to create a particular style called Follow Me, or sometimes people will call it dominoes. We talked about our mazes. There can be matching for domain and range. Each of us have independently created a station about matching different representations of the same line. Again, NCTM really likes it when we talk about multiple representations. I've created Lift the Flap books. My grade 9 students really love Lift the Flap, so taking that idea and running it with it. And something as simple as, yes, you've got the right strategy, or no, whoops, try again. We've each done some activities about graphing lines based on randomly choosing something. We talked about our flashcards or concept cards. Maybe we're going to match a description to a trigonometry diagram, our Tarja puzzles, solve a system of equations. We've got loads of foldables that we found or created. So there are lots of great options there. But one of the things you'll notice is that so often feedback is a big piece, because depending on your class size, and I know lots of people will say, ooh, 17 is small. I've had classes of 17 where I was run off my feet. For myself, typically my Math 10 classes are brushing right up against cap 31, 32 compared to one of me. I really like when they can get that feedback right away. So sometimes it might be as simple as, I should have grabbed these faster, putting all of the answers for a worksheet on the back and then highlighting them to draw students' attention to those. It might be something like the Tarja or the pixel art, where when they are on the right track, a shape or an image is going to appear. It might be putting a copy of worked solutions. And often I'll use a different color pen to do some annotations. If I know it's a common mistake, I'll do like, don't forget to check this step. Did you remember to? Often those are really useful. These days where students have more technology, we might be looking at one-to-one at your particular site next year. You might use a self-marking tool like a Google Form quiz or an interactive page made through something like TeacherMade. You might be looking at a binder ring of correct definitions. It might be something like the foldable where you include a teacher example for students to look at to make sure that they're on the right track. Lots of great options and opportunities there.
Yeah, and there's still opportunity to have a discussion with students when they don't know what they're doing wrong, but at least you're not running around going, yes, you're right, yes, you're right, yes, you're right, yes, you're right. It's really when they run into a challenge that you're having that discussion with them, and that's really where the rich conversation happens anyway.
And it brings in two really beautiful moments. The number of times your not very confident students will flip something over and you hear a yes, and they got it right and they get to celebrate, and that's amazing. But also when the student says, okay, I didn't get it right and I don't know why, can you please help me with that? Those are equally as amazing and awesome.
Yeah. So just a couple of tips. Always try the activities first. I don't know a single teacher who hasn't assigned a question and then gone, whoops, that wasn't what I meant it to be. But even activities, even if you get them from us, I mean, there's sometimes you think you know what a station says to do, or where your kids are going to run into, where students are going to run into problems, but it's always best if you work it out first so you can kind of anticipate those. You don't have to create all the materials yourself. The internet is a wonderful place, mostly. We highly recommend laminating or using page protectors. Mm-hmm. Again, you can get your own heat laminator for like $40 at Walmart. I'm not, paid to advertise for them or anything, but most schools have them. But page protectors are a great equivalent too, because you can still write on those with whiteboard markers. Whiteboards, like if you have mini whiteboards or even slightly larger ones and markers that you can put at a station, Students will do anything with a whiteboard marker. They love to use those. And it saves you a lot of paper and pencil. I would find if I asked students to take paper and pencil, even if I gave them a clipboard or whatever, I'd find it all over my classroom at the end of the day. And they don't really keep it. The value is in doing it more so than in walking around with it. So it makes a great alternative and it's less mess. And as you saw here, scrapbook paper can be used as a really colorful backing and help you sort stuff out very well.
And yeah, the biggest things I would really say, have an idea where you land on student device use. For us at CEC, we have in the past discouraged students from using their cell phones because then that pulled them out of the activity very often. Oh, do you notice there was a snap notification? But occasionally students want to take a picture of their work. So sometimes we've had ask a teacher in the room first. And again, try the activities first. Each of us individually presenting this at the Math Teachers Association. And this is not at all a slight against our colleagues, but people are like, yes, can I just have the activities? And we always want to say, yeah, sure. But if you just take something and print it and don't do it first, you can go down dark rabbit holes and bad things can happen. So definitely we want to make sure to try them.
The other thing that I have that I like to do is I take all the instruction sheets for each station and I just put them in a binder so that when I am using certain stations, I can just go find the instruction sheets and they're all printed on cardstock and laminated, but it helps me try to keep them organized and know what I have. And when I'm really on the ball, they're organized by unit. They're not right now. But I find that helpful.
For sure. So we talked about how the internet is our friend. First of all, one of the most important things I ever learned, and I know it was one of my professors during my BED who taught me this, but I don't remember who. So amazing human being, my apologies that I can't give you credit. When you're searching for a practice page, when you're searching for a maze, when you are searching for matching, try adding the words worksheet and PDF to your search string. That often does wonders. If you're looking for some simple drill worksheets to fluff out your stations to have a little bit more, CUDA software has answers included and generally produces some pretty high quality things.
Even if you're just looking for questions that have already got answers that you're going to put on popsicle sticks, you're going to do whatever with. Sometimes it's nice to have something that you know has already kind of been worked out and vetted. Hermitech, who produces the Tarja Puzzle Maker, we have a link for that one as well, and they actually have multiple different styles of puzzles that you can choose from. A link to the video tutorial that taught me how to make pixel art after I heard about the cool idea of it is included, as well as the Desmos teacher page. It is possible to build your own activities. She's really great at that. I'm not. Getting there anyway.
But I'm really good at searching for pre-made activities that will suit what I want to ask my students to do.
And tip for there, don't just search within Desmos, also search within Google, because the Desmos ones are really good, made by Desmos, and they're really polished, but you can get some really good teacher-made ones if you search through Google.
So in terms of implementing, once you've got all your resources ready and you're at the top of the roller coaster, ready to go, make sure that you tell the students ahead of time about the stations, maybe even prep them for what stations they're going to be able to choose from, and expectations. So are they going to be able to use cell phones? Are they going to be allowed to have earbuds in? How many stations are they supposed to visit? Using clear signage, and we've discovered over the years being able to get that signage vertical so students can quickly find stations is really helpful. We also like to suggest a time frame for movement. Now, I don't love tying my students down to you have to move every 10 minutes. We've both, I think, landed at try and get to 3 or 4, depending on the time frame you have. Try and get to a certain number of stations within the period.
Yeah, just remind them if you're halfway through and you've only been at one station, you should really try something new for a while.
Yeah.
Some students just want to sit down and put their head down and do every single question, and they have a hard time leaving before they're done, but the stations don't need to be completed necessarily. So no, I mean, I guess it depends on the students and the group, and sometimes you're just like, all right, you folks need to move. Like, yeah, give someone else a chance.
We definitely also recommend having, if at all possible, more seats than students so that no one is ever stuck waiting for a spot to move to. In terms of building interest, moving to a different space in the school, if it's at all possible, really helps to build that interest. And also means, if possible, you can set everything up the day before, the morning before, and bring the students in, and it's a little bit less chaotic that way. Collaborating with another class, if you can make it happen, definitely adds another layer of richness to the activity. And if at all possible, having another colleague with you is really helpful. It may be pulling in one of your resource colleagues. It may be, if you're really lucky, getting an administrator to help you out with a sub so that another math teacher can come into your room. I've invited math coaches to my room before to help out with things. Any of those kinds of human resources are really useful to have.
Absolutely. And one other thing that I sometimes do, I don't do it all the time, but sometimes I give them a maximum amount of people at a station. So I'll say you can't have more than 4 people here. Even though there might be 5 or 6 seats, like there should only be 4 people here at a time. That way you don't have one station that's got all the people at it. And it kind of sometimes forces them to kind of not move as a group. It's just one of those things that you might decide to use depending on your group and how it's going.
And you're going to know your students best.
Right. It's just an option. So moving forward with this, we've had some support given to us from both CCRCE and EECD, and we are working on creating a set of actual completed stations that will be provided digitally so that teachers can kind of use those as examples to build upon, to grow their own set of station materials. We don't know when that's going to be provided.
It turns out the second lockdown in the spring kind of slowed us down on that one.
Yeah.
But we're getting there.
So there will be at some point, and like I said, I can't say it'll be out this first semester or second semester, whatever. I have no idea. We have no idea. But it is coming, so we are doing our best to take a lot of what we have created on paper and provide it in a way that you can access it, print it, do what you want with it, laminate it yourself, I suppose. But it's a long process because a lot of our stuff was hand created, so it takes a little bit longer. As you know, typing out math expressions is lots of fun.
And of course, part of it too is making sure something that, as Kelly said, makes sense to us would also make sense to someone in Cape Breton, in Lunenburg, in Yarmouth, and not just the way that our 2 brains work together, because we work together a lot, maybe more than necessary. So keep an eye out, and hopefully we'll have some good things to share soon. In the meantime, speaking of sharing, we certainly do have some time left for any questions or discussion, but at the bottom of this slide, we have a tiny URL link, which is going to take you to a shared Google folder. Pardon me. And that's got some digital copies of this slide deck and of some resources that we're pretty confident are error-free and are good to share in this form. So we wanted to make sure that everyone leaves today with some things that they'll be able to use right away.
Yeah, so there's a couple, I think, foldables in there. There's the solving systems of equations station and maybe a Tarja.
There's a Tarja, there's a trigonometry pixel
yeah.
art. There's some good things to get started.
So there's some stuff there. And of course, if you have any questions, now would be a great time. Watch the chat, I guess, is the easiest.
Yeah, we'll watch the chat, and I'll keep an eye on the second Menti in case
anything pops back.
Any more questions came in. We did have an earlier question. How do we ensure students are staying on tasks, moving through and completing the stations? That's a really good question. And again, it depends. For me, very often it's that I don't run this activity until at least 6 weeks into the school year, and I know my classes, and I know who is more likely to need a nudge than others. Yep. So I'll be moving around the room and encouraging them to move on. In some cases, I'll give students a passport and say, I want you to record which stations you visited and what did you do, what did you practice, what was the best part of the day. It might be exit slips. Any of those little strategies that you'd use any other time in your classrooms are really useful.
Yeah, I have done like a reflection at the end where I've asked students, like, what stations did you attempt? What was your favorite? What was your least favorite? What would you like to see next time? Just so that there is some amount of, checking in and having a discussion about it later. But again, just doing the whole, you're going to walk around, you're going to see who's working and who's not. And you're going to encourage them. And usually the tasks are engaging enough that they're mostly on task. But when I come around to a group and I see that they're all sitting back and nobody's working, then I'm saying, all right, what one are we trying next? All right, I think you need to go try this one, or maybe we should try a different station or something along those lines. So,
and now another one of my colleagues who regularly does this activity with our Math 10s, if we're within 7 minutes of the end of the class and He notices that energy is low. He understands how my brain works and the color coding in the organization. Every single time he'll call out to the whole room, okay, everybody, I want the scrap paper in the recycling. I want the pencils back. Neaten it up, put it away, put everything the way you found it. And so if we're getting to that ebb of the time, involving students in ownership for the space is another great way to kind of have another one of those changes, the start and stop, that also makes a nice bookend to the activity.
Yep. All right.
Well, we'll give it a few more moments because asking questions digitally on delay.
Yeah, the delay is what's throwing me off. Every time I turn and look at the participant view, it's definitely throwing me off.
Yeah.
It's a little strange. This is why I keep glancing to the side.
But while we're waiting for any other questions, we do want to thank you for taking some time on an absolutely gorgeous afternoon in the middle of your much needed summer vacation.
Much needed, much deserved.
Yeah. And we're both pretty easy to find on GNESPES. There are not many Nicolos or Kelly Powers.
Power K, that's me.
Yeah. So if you had any questions, by all means, feel free to reach out.
Yeah. Thanks, folks. I think we're right at 3:29. So I will watch the questions for a couple more minutes, but otherwise, thank you.
Thank
I'll
you again.
just come on.
Okay.
I'll just pop on to thank Kelly and Carolyn for your presentation today and for your efforts to support Summer Learning Academy. We thank you for all of that. And at this time, I think we'll disable the broadcast and stream if you're all right with that.
Perfect.
Sure thing. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Oh, I do see one comment in the chat box before I disable.
Oh, let me look. Oh, love the idea of a passport. There you go.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you,
Very
Ashley.
good. All right, thanks.
Have a fantastic day, friends.